David. So the next item up is the update on the overview report on delivery of 11,000 council homes. We are going to be looking tonight, and you'll see from the report that we've got in our papers, at the wider strategic issues. And we're going to be hearing first of all from Councillor Livingston. So if you'd like to come forward, Richard, and officers as well, if you probably there or there, wherever you, yeah, probably there for the camera. Okay. It's your better side, Richard. They're all good.
Oh, there's a rude answer to that one, isn't there?
Right. So we've had the detailed report. The reason we wanted to look at this is also the particular issue of Willow Walk, which we'll come back to a little bit later. But if I could, you've obviously been to us a number of times before, Richard, and you know the drill. If you could give us an introduction to kind of a verbal summary of some of the issues raised in your written report, and also touch on Willow Walk as well. That would be of interest to us as well.
I'll try and do that very briefly, because I know that members will want to ask questions.
Go ahead.
And apologies from Councillor Mark Williams, who is obviously the cabinet member responsible for new homes, but he's unfortunately elsewhere at the moment, so I've agreed to
we're
come
grateful
in.
for you covering.
So there may be questions that you might want to hold over for him, but I'll try and deal with what I can.
Sure.
This report obviously updates members of OSC on the progress that we're making on our plans to build 11,000 new council homes, and in particular the first 1,500 that we want to deliver by 2018. And it broadly sets out where we are, how we're going to achieve that. As you know, there's fundamentally three elements to our proposals. First of all, direct delivery, so those ones that we're building on our own land in particular. A lot of that is infill development. We also have regeneration in partnership proposals, which is where we're working with developers to develop schemes which will create new council homes. And then the third element is where we as a council are purchasing new homes from developers. So this report sets out some of that, and it also sets out some of the important history in this. First of all, about the charter principles that we've established, also the process that we have around those regeneration and partnership schemes to give reassurances to people around some of those developments so that they understand how that will work. It also talks about the consultation process and about the design values, which you may know we agreed at the last cabinet as well. Just in terms of Willow Walk, there have been some significant delays in getting Willow Walk open, but I am glad to say that today keys were handed over to the new tenants of Willow Walk. So that's some good news that we finally reached the end of that. And I think there's some very important learning lessons. Sorry, all lessons are learning. Sorry, some very important lessons for us to learn out of this. As you might know, that there've been two principal delays around Willow Walk. The first was around the installation of phone lines to the building, and that was critical not only for people's own phones, but actually more importantly because we needed those to ensure that the emergency systems in lifts and otherwise could work. So we had a long period whilst we were negotiating with Virgin Media to ensure that those lines were installed, and that took far longer than any of us liked. The other one was we then had some fairly poor weather, and it became fairly clear in that poor weather there were some issues with the balconies that were there, which led to they weren't draining properly, and so water was flooding back into the properties. And so that was an issue which we followed up with Balfour's, who built these homes, to make sure that that was getting right. And that's something they've done at their cost, but has created a further delay. And I think there's that in particular, there's some important lessons for us about how we ensure that the readiness of these buildings is checked properly as we get close to the sign-off process on all of these. So that's where we are. But the good news, as I said, is that the people have received their keys today.
Good. Thank you, Richard. Now, if you'll allow us, Richard, and it's going to mean you sticking around a little bit longer, partly because of time constraints, but I actually think it makes more sense if we now hear from the residents who've come along this evening. Probably best if everyone just stays where they're sat and can do that. If you can do it from where you're sat if you like. I gather that there's obviously we're looking at the wider strategic issues of how the community is engaged in terms of identifying sites and how those sites are identified in the first place. If you've got something you want to hand out, yeah, please do. Yeah, sure.
It's not being filmed. So bad. Just checking. Censorship, though.
No censorship. That's quite good enough. Share. Yeah, there's another one. So, and what I was saying was, I thought it would be useful for us to get your specific example and your take on this. You go ahead.
My name is Sue Chalice. I'm the chair of the Mayflower Community TRA. The Mayflower Community TRA represents the interest of the community as a whole and aims for the good of the community. We do this by promoting social inclusion, supporting events in the community, e.g. bullying stops here, busybodies, organising family events and collaborating with the council to run activities. The Mayflower Community Hall is an important part of the community, as this is where we organise all social events in the community and has been in existence for over 50 years. The Mayflower Community TRA found out in a tweet from the Cabinet member that our community hall had been selected for a proposed housing infill. The Mayflower Community TRA was not involved in its nomination. Neither was there any prior formal consultation with the Mayflower Community TRA. At the 26th of October meeting with the council representative and Labour Party councillors, this issue was raised, and the only response from the council representative and the councillors was that the Mayflower Community Hall was beyond repair based on a council survey. The Mayflower TRA requested for a copy of this survey from the council representative. So far, we have not received the survey report used to select the Mayflower Community Hall as the location for the proposed housing infill. The Mayflower Community TRA would like answers to the following questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Number one, why was the Mayflower Community Hall selected as the site for the proposed housing infill? Number two, why was there no communication between the council Labour Party councillors and the Mayflower Community TRA? Number three, why was the hall left in a state of disrepair for so long by the council? Number four, why have we not received the survey report used to make the decision to select the Mayflower Community Hall site for the proposed housing infill? Number five, how can we take the Mayflower Community Hall off the list of sites? The Mayflower Community TRA do not want the site to be included for housing infill. Rather, we want the council to restore the hall for the community. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for coming along and for putting those questions. Richard, you've heard those questions. I'm accepting that obviously part of this process isn't solely your responsibility as a cabinet member. Could you give us a stab at answering those questions that have been put?
I'll try and work through those.
Yeah.
I think the first key question is obviously the first one about why was the Mayflower site identified. And the council has a programme of working on our tenants and residence halls to bring up to a good standard. I think there's been about 23 halls across the borough that work's been carried out on to date. And that's an ongoing programme, obviously as part of that. As we get to the sort of next bit, then work is done to look at halls and look at the work that's needed and the level of work that's likely. The issue with the Mayflower Hall is it was very clear that the work that was going to be needed there was going to be quite extensive and was likely to cost more than other halls in the programme, significantly more. So that's one of the key issues that come out of it. I think it's worth recognising, and Sue may well correct me on this because she obviously knows the hall far better than I do. But some of the challenges with the building are it's a building which I think was built in the late 40s, early 50s, and it was originally designed to be a replacement facility for the old Rotherhithe Town Hall, which was destroyed in the Second World War. So originally it had a function to serve as a local hall, and later on it transferred to local tenants to be their tenants' hall. It was a building, because it was built fairly quickly, that it's probably beyond the life that was originally envisaged for it. It's a building that has some significant problems with asbestos. A large amount of the building is built with elements which contain asbestos. It has problems with its roof, which is partly collapsing in places. It has some significant problems with its heating system as well, and the heating doesn't work well, doesn't heat the building, and because the building is riddled with asbestos, it makes it very difficult to correct that. There are some other issues there as well in terms of disability access and things like that. Some of those things have been worked on in the past and made better, but there still are one or two issues there. But the substantial issues are some of those big structural problems with the hall. And as a result of that, officers took a look at that, have had some survey work done, but I think we're also mindful that some of the survey work we've done on halls previously has been wildly inaccurate. And so we're taking the view that this was likely to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to put right, and therefore, given that sort of scale of work, perhaps it was a better idea to look at a replacement facility. And so the proposal was then put forward that as spending that sort of money on a standalone hall itself is quite an expensive thing to do, that perhaps the best option to do was to look at providing that as part and parcel with a scheme to provide new council homes as well.
So on the issue of communications and you know, tonight that was found out through a tweet, for example, how did that situation arise?
Okay, there have been, I know there've been some attempts to talk with the TRA and the TRA committee before that tweet had happened.
Can I stop you there?
Okay.
No, Richard. We were never spoken to. We were never gone. As
Okay.
I said in the letter there, the first time we heard was on a Sunday morning at 8:45 from another chair.
Okay.
The council have never come to us. As I said, the first meeting we had was on the 26th of October.
Okay, so let's stick on that one issue. So, okay, there's a bit of a difference of opinion about whether or not
and certainly what I've been told, and I've not tried to have this communication directly, but I've been told there was an attempt to try and have it discussed at the AGM, which I believe happened in September, on the 28th of September.
Yeah, I won't stop you. I won't say.
That was after the cabinet list, though.
Yeah, but I stopped it, Richard, because the tenants, the 60, nearly 70 tenants that turned up to vote the committee in, were not interested in listening. They were coming to an AGM, and that wasn't the right place to do it, okay? And we still didn't know. And if I can go back on something, I do agree with you, the hall needs repairing. As for the heating, Richard, the council come and turned that off 2 years ago. They did not tell us why. As for the roof, Richard, yes, the roof does need doing, but it's not collapsing. And as for the asbestos, Richard, 3 years ago I had them come in and take samples, and I have cladding all the way round. As long as you don't interfere with it, it's not dangerous. Yes, of course we'd like the asbestos taken up, but in all the time I've let the hall out to the tenants, to residents around there, no one has ever damaged. There's no asbestos leaking onto anyone.
I just want to let's move on to your other questions. I think we need to get to a conclusion on that, and then I would like to move on to the wider strategic issues that are to do with.
I'm not an expert in asbestos, but my understanding is that whilst you're absolutely right, if it's left untouched and nobody does anything daft with it, then the asbestos is safe. The problem comes when you need to do those things to sort out the heating, you need to make those repairs to the roof, but actually it's inevitable then that you have to disturb the asbestos to do those things and to put those right. So the issue is that given, as we say, it's a building that was built to probably have been replaced by something more substantial a long time ago, this seemed like a very good time to look at that, given that putting all these things right were clearly going to be very expensive, given the asbestos problems, given the scale of problems there is the heating system.
So on the survey that we had, that was the fourth question. What the survey wasn't shared with the TRA. Do we know why?
We haven't seen it.
I also asked for it last week, and Richard said he'd see what he could do.
Okay, I can certainly get something circulated after the meeting. I have a copy. I do have a copy.
Sorry, Chair, but you knew this was coming up. This report only appeared on Friday. I think there's something really wrong if members here are trying to scrutinise something that you turn up without a survey that you know people wanted. I mean, I've lost count of the amount of emails asking about this survey, and then you say, oh well, I'll get back to you after the meeting takes place. It's a nonsense.
Well, if I could continue, the point I was going to make is, yes, we had a survey that was carried out by a company called Pod, I think back in 2012, and identified some significant costs of £87,065. However, I think the big challenge that we then need to think about, and you might say that that's inconsistent with what I said about the value, is actually we found that those past surveys that tend to have overrun significantly. So to give you some examples of that, the Brandon 3 Hall, the original survey was estimated at 25,880. He actually ended up spending 124,544, so almost 5 times as much as the survey. And we've got similar examples. Pelia, we had an increase of 2.5 times as much as the original survey. Sexual was almost 4 times. Tabard was over twice as much. Penrose was over twice as much.
So
the challenge is knowing.
Hang on, I just coming back to the wider issues here, because I think there are lessons that clearly need to be learned from particularly in terms of communications and engagement and list. Because if this is going to happen time and time again, we're going to need to engage with residents on particular estates and with people in particular areas. If we're going to be embarking on such a massive house building programme, it's really important that this kind of that people feel that they have been properly consulted about what's happening in their local area, that they're and that
consulted, not just they feel it.
Well, yeah, both. I mean. Never mind. Right,
well, I think clearly the communication hasn't gotten right here, and we need to have done better.
How do we?
Yes, I'm more than happy to apologise, and I apologise that you.
I understand,
didn't
but
have
I'm
that.
very hurt listening to what you've been told there.
Yeah.
Number one, right, to put the heating on, right, would not have affected the asbestos. I think you and I, Richard, should get together and you come into that hall so I can take you round and show it.
More than happy
it's
to.
a little bit of land.
Yeah.
It's a tiny bit of land.
I'm more
than happy to do
with one more
that,
question here, and then I'm going to come to Councillor Schimmel. And
but I do, just on the communication point, I do think we needed to do more to communicate and have that discussion with the TRA before this report went to Cabinet, and I agree that ought to take place.
So my question is, how do we ensure that doesn't happen again, and that the communication with the local residents in other areas is more effective, and that the processes are properly followed.
Well, what we also agreed in I think it was in the September Cabinet, was a process by which we would consult, and that. I think that should ensure that in the future we are getting a lot sharper in all of this, and so that council officers know very clearly what the process is, what are the things that need to take place before something will get onto the list for publication. So I think we've already taken steps which can improve that and put those safeguards in place to ensure that things don't come before Cabinet without that prior consultation notification of Tenants and Residents Association. So I think we managed to get that resolved and in place. So that is there. I think there were clearly some difficulties here, and I know Sue has slightly challenged the version of events that I've been given, but the information that we have is that there were attempts to talk to the TRA even before the September Cabinet and to raise things.
We'll take it as read that is in dispute, and that you don't believe that to be the case.
So clearly we need to work out what went wrong there, and I think there clearly needs to be some better communication. I think a clearer trail on all of this, so that these things aren't in dispute, and so that the TRA has that.
Rosie.
Well, I mean, my question, I suppose, sort of overlaps a little bit with what you've just said, but I think it would. I mean, this can't be the first time that you've consulted on an issue similar to this or of this kind of magnitude, and I think it would just be really helpful to understand what did go wrong. So what would normally happen, in what sort of stages of consultation or attempts to contact the TRA should there have been, which obviously in this instance haven't happened. So because I can't believe that the only attempt would or should have been attempting to attend one meeting, which I think in terms of the chronology was actually after after this decision was made. So, I mean, should there have been a certain number of letters or calls or emails, or, I mean, if you can just set out what the processes should normally be, so that in future instances we, I suppose, have something to kind of hold you and other cabinet members to, because obviously we'd hope that this wouldn't come up again, but you're right that this won't be the first, won't be the last.
I mean, there were, as I understand it, there were a number of attempts to contact both the chair and the secretary in late July and during August. I mean, obviously August can be a difficult time because people are away, but there were some attempts by our officers to contact during that time. I think there was a letter as well of the 22nd of September, although I've not had sight of the letter of the 22nd of September. I've seen some subsequent letters that refer to that letter. But that was obviously.
It must be possible to get like a written record of, if these were calls or emails or letters, they must exist somewhere.
So we had a chronology that's set out for us, so we can look at.
Well, hang on, let's hear the chronology then. Go.
Okay. Not evidence.
Okay. So on the 8th of June, there was a briefing with officers and myself and Councillor Williams on the idea that Mayflower might be a potential site given the hall. There was then a following meeting on the 19th of June amongst officers on next steps. There was then a meeting on the 15th of July involving myself and the ward councillors about next steps, where various steps were agreed in terms of how to contact the TRA and raise these things with the TRA. 31st of July, because I think initially one of my fellow councillors.
Okay, so it seems that there was. I think we get the picture. I've got one follow-up from Rosie, and then I've got.
Well, sorry, and then, as I said, from the 31st of July and through August, there are a number of attempts to contact the TRA.
All right, okay. Rosie, last question then. Rosie, I'm coming to Rosie
now. All
now,
of those steps that you've set out so far don't involve contacting the TRA. Obviously,
from the 31st of July,
there were then attempts following up. But I'd also express a little bit of concern that there were 4 or 5 meetings from the sounds of it where you worked up these plans in detail before the TRA had any idea about them. So it sounds like you'd already pretty much made a decision before, or at least like the decision was quite a way down the line, shouldn't it?
Well, all of these things are proposals, Councillor Sewell. So I mean, none of this has been decided. So this was the identification of the site. As I said from the outset, there were clearly some issues with the TRA hall, which flagged it up as a potential for being a site for new homes. So that first happened on the 8th of June. There was then that an officers' meeting on the 19th of June, and then a second meeting which involved the ward councillors on the 15th of June of July.
Okay.
So there were two meetings involving councillors.
What I want to do now, just with this, Richard, through the chair, please. What I want to do now is, I think we accept that clearly there have been imperfections, to put it mildly, in the way that this particular case. What I'm keen for us to do is to bring out some of the lessons, but also talk about the wider issues and what happens as we move forward. So with members of the committee keeping that in mind, because I think if we just continue to go over lists of meetings that might have happened, then it's not going to get us particularly very far. It's not going to be particularly constructive. I think the point is very well made. I think you've made it articulately tonight.
Get number 5 though, we can get it taken off.
Well, I think, to be fair, I mean, I don't want to speak for the cabinet member, but it sounds like a pretty strong case has been made for it. Yeah, and I think that's been heard by the cabinet member tonight. Johnson.
Speaking from my ward experience, I definitely feel some of the lessons have been learned in terms of, I know some of the, to give credit where credit's due a little bit, some of the engagement with a similar sort of scheme, there is a concerted effort to try and engage with the TRA. My question is, how do we learn from what we've done well in this situation, or how does the council learn what they've done well in, say, for example, in a situation in my ward, and replicate in areas that we might not necessarily be effective in terms of communicating? And secondly, in terms of our communication with TRAs generally, how do we standardise that so it, for every new scheme coming forward, there's, TRAs feel empowered to be able to say, this is at the stage they will be able to contact, and this is when I'll be able to feed in.
I think that's very, very helpful as observations. And as I said, I think the process that we now have in place, and we've learned some lessons not only from Mayflower but some other ones where I don't think communication was as good as it ought to have been in terms of how these things have gone forward, in terms of putting forward a process that we think works more effectively. I think in terms of things that we could have probably done better here, I think one of the things that we tried to do with Mayflower was learning from some lessons where I don't think we always got things right previously. So in the previous round, there are a number of places that were identified where the first anybody knew of it was when an officer turned up at a TRA meeting, and so all of these things came as a little surprise to people, and so it was therefore thought that the best way to do this is, rather than it just happen like that at a TRA meeting, it's better to have an engagement with the officers of the TRA first, to talk to them about it all, which is what was attempted here. I think the problem we had here is because of the timings of some of the TRA meetings and the difficulties over that holiday period, that clearly didn't work as it ought to have done with the Mayflower. However, I think having learnt from the Mayflower as well, now the process that we have in place clearly sets out what order things should happen, when things will happen, what the stages are to make sure we get that right. So as you're saying, from the examples that you were talking about, which I think is probably a similar issue involving a hall, that actually we did get the steps right in terms of taking that forward and the way forward on that. So I think we now have the process in place. It's taken us a bit of iteration to get there, but we now have, I think, a policy and a process which is fit for purpose.
Okay, I've got Helen and then Anu.
Two quick questions. One, just to follow on from Councillor Shilman and Mr Johnson's question just there about the process, just to push it a little bit further, because I know that if this had happened, with TRAs in my ward, they would also be very upset and anxious about this. Is there any way in which there can be some kind of principle which states, obviously this is just a proposal list, and further consultation follows a proposal list, but it does seem that, that there shouldn't be a kind of public naming of a site like that without there having been some communication, and sure there's going to be issues to be ironed out further down the line. So could there be agreements of a principle that in the future, it's not just about steps being followed, but if you had a holiday season like that, the TRA wouldn't find themselves on a kind of public list unless there's that communication has been successful. And then the second question is just about, I suppose, a more strategic question in relation to the report. Just whether or not you can give us a bit more detail about how space for TRA halls, etc., are kind of factored into the direct delivery programme, and how the space, community space, etc., is going to be built into kind of future plans, so that we have the numbers of residential units that are being put forward, but just a little bit about how the community space is being factored into new builds.
Okay. I think, there's only a few projects involving community space, but there are a few there. So clearly the idea is we get the outcome of that as part and parcel of the work that we do with the local community in terms of designing as we would do in terms of the Mayflower, because it was very much the idea that this was not just about getting rid of the hall. This is very much about providing a new facility and providing new council homes for council rent, of which half would go to people on the estates covered by Mayflower TRA as part and parcel of that, as we do with all new developments of new council homes. How do we make sure that we get these things right? We have certainly built into the process now that consultation with the TRA has to take place, as well as obviously discussion with all councillors before it will get onto the list in the future.
So this couldn't happen again. Because of the new process that's been put in place, this couldn't happen again.
That's right.
Okay, that's useful. And the second question that Helen.
So that's what I sort of addressed first in terms of community space. And clearly, I think that's a matter of working with the Tenants and Residents Association to work out what is the right design in terms of this, what's the right capacity, and finding the appropriate solution in those cases.
Okay, Anu.
The problem is I'm concerned it's still happening as we speak. So residents were promised at the meeting they had on the 26th of October a copy of this survey. I've just checked my emails. You were emailed directly on the 16th of November asking for a copy of this survey. It's now the 30th of November and we still haven't seen the survey. So my first question is, why has it taken so long for the survey to appear? My second question is still about transparency. Are there minutes of those meetings that took place in June and July? Because this should be on the record. This should be open for people to look back and see what was said. I'm very concerned that we keep being given chronologies. It happened about the birth holders as well. There's been engagement. We've repeatedly engaged with residents, and yet when you ask for proof, there doesn't appear to be any. And I think Helen's point about engagement only counts when it's been two-way, not when you've phoned a number that may not even work anymore and left a voicemail. So I think it's really important, number one, that we get an answer about why that survey data hasn't been produced, and number two, we ask for minutes for those June and July meetings.
Okay, well, all I can do is make sure that we get that information to you as quickly as possible.
Why?
Okay.
Why since
well, let's hear the answers before we jump in. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know if any officers have any answer on that about why that's not been provided yet. I'm not sure we're clear, but
I can check with the TRA.
Yeah.
Which
Which
officers promised that on the 26th?
Sorry, I wasn't.
Which officers came to that meeting in October and promised that survey? Was it Ian
well,
Brindley?
you had the three councils. You had Kath.
No, which council officers?
No, you had Louis Rossi. It was actually, it wasn't. It was.
So all we're looking
it was
for
Ian
here.
Brindley.
Okay,
Actually,
if
So
we
there
can
were
go
two
back,
officers
if we
and
go back
three
to
ward
those,
councillors.
just a second, Anu.
Yeah.
If we can
I
go
just
back
don't-
to those officers,
Sorry.
find out why. If we can get
Okay.
an explanation, if there's not an adequate explanation, we get an apology.
Yeah.
In writing. I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
And then that information is shared as well.
Absolutely.
I don't see
and
that.
the ward councillors chair as well. They promised as well.
Well, whoever holds the information, I think, is who should
Yes,
should
absolutely.
apologise. If the ward council don't have that data, they can't force
Yeah.
something they don't have.
Get
So-
it on behalf of the residents.
So as long as that's done, I think at this stage, obviously regrettable though that set of circumstances is, I think that's all that we've done. I don't see that there's anything more to be gained in re-going back over that particular issue. If it's appropriate, let's get an apology sent and let's get the information shared. Okay,
My
Maisie.
second question was about minutes of June and July meetings.
I'm sure that those can be made available. I think the June meeting, as I said, it was only one of a number of, it would have been a very cursory, this was one of the number of sites on the list, let's have a further meeting about it. It won't have been any more substantial than that, but I'm sure we can find a note that does that. I'm sure there must have been a note of the meeting of the 15th of July as well.
Because I'm concerned that we agree things at these meetings and then they don't happen. So the clear action is that we will get a reason why the survey data wasn't given, and that will be given to all OSC members. And the second action is that all OSC members and the TRA will be given the meeting minutes of the 2 meetings in June and the meeting in July.
So that's the officer meeting, and
We've got notes of the officer meeting there.
so you got this one.
Yeah, you see notes. There's notes there.
Yeah. So if they could be
Yeah,
shared with
we'll
OSC
try to find
members
those.
and
Yeah.
the TRA.
Okay. Okay, Mason.
I hope you don't mind if I kind of broaden it out a
I
bit
would,
now.
I think it would be welcome if it were broader,
So,
to be honest.
as we all know, we've got a commitment to make to build 11,000 council homes. I think, if I'm right, 1,500 of which we've committed to build by 2018, or that's the timeline.
Yeah.
You know, we all are very aware of how important that is, given that there's somewhere around 20,000 people waiting for a home in this borough at the moment. So we need to build as fast as we can. So really, I wouldn't. Thanks so much for your report. It's really detailed, really useful. But I wanted just to ask you now to explain to us really, what do you see as the biggest challenges ahead of us to meeting the 2018 target? You know, top 3 challenges, for example, and what needs to be done by the council still in order to address those challenges to make sure that we do actually meet that target that we've set for ourselves.
Okay. Clearly, I think the big challenges that, as we've kind of discussed today, I think there are challenges in terms of consultation, getting the consultation carried out and completed so that we can make progress. That's a key challenge that we need to address, and do that in a timely fashion. I think, clearly perhaps on that pressure has resulted in this case of things proceeding perhaps at a pace that was inappropriately fast in a bit, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen again. But there is clearly always that pressure to make sure get things done. I think in terms of procurement is a key challenge in terms of timeliness, and we have in place process to make sure that happens, but there obviously are risks around some of that.
Shall I talk about
that would be very helpful. Thanks, Bruce.
Chair, Bruce Copley. What we're trying to do is encourage more contractors to work with us. We're using a wider range of frameworks. We recently had something which we called a Bidders' Day, in which we invited all the contractors who were either currently working in the borough or could work in the borough in the future to get involved in our schemes. And the direct delivery side of the programme had an opportunity to present to contractors what was coming up. So I do see procurement as a challenge, because the market is, as everybody knows, very busy at the moment, and that's impacting on price, and it's also impacting on programme. And it's useful for me just to listen to some of the discussions on consultation. On the Southwark Regeneration and Partnership Programme, we're taking care to ensure that we've involved all the TRAs in the discussions before we open the consultation.
Right.
One of the things I want to go back and check, however, is that we're properly minuting those discussions so that that's recorded. So I think in terms of risks, it's clearly about the consultation process being right. It's about the planning process. It's about the design. It's in the involvement of the stakeholders, and finally the procurement process. And then if we're referring to the position on Willow Walk, it's a really, really smart development, but we need to do better in terms of our process for handover. And that's something which we've been working on, which we'll be applying to the other schemes, which will be finishing from March onwards.
So the lessons are being learned from Willow Walk.
We've had one workshop on the lessons from Willow Walk in some detail, in some technical detail, and they're being applied to future projects.
Chair, can I just follow up and ask who's involved in that workshop, just to?
Yes, it was all the project managers who were involved in the projects, and it was also the external consultants.
Okay, that's
Rebecca.
I've got 2 quick questions. One is, and Richard, I don't know if you know the answer to this, are we linking, obviously building 11,000 council homes, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for jobs and apprenticeship. Are we linking together our plans for building these homes with our priorities around finding new jobs and apprenticeships, especially for local people. And the second one is we've obviously got some really great examples in here of solutions, things like converting garages into properties and things like that. So in my ward, we've also got the garages on the Kinglake. We've obviously already consulted kind of 2,500 people, but what plans have we got to kind of get people's ideas about their estates, where they think there might be gaps, or where they notice things in their local areas where they might be able to identify where we can put further homes?
Okay, I mean, certainly in terms of apprenticeships and those employment opportunities, that is part and parcel of the work that we're doing to procure and putting that into the procurement specifications. In terms of engagement, as you might know, we've already had a number of proposals that have been offered forward by tenants and residents associations, where they've identified opportunities on their estates which they've come forward with, and we're exploring those and taking those up and consulting on them. So there was a number that were identified in phase 2 that came forward from tenants and residents associations, where we're currently doing some work in terms of specifications and working those through. And we'll be having some further consultation meetings with those TRAs on how we can take those forward. And for us, as you know, one of the drivers that we thought was very important to try and encourage TRAs and the states to bring forward ideas was that promise that 50% of the properties there of the new council homes will go to people that live on those estates that are in housing need. And that clearly has been the case in Willow Walk, where half the places are going to people who live on the sexual estate. And one of the challenges that's come through from this is how do we set a boundary which actually works in terms of getting the right numbers. We were lucky in sectioning just about having the right number of people in the housing need living on that estate. But obviously you had a very small estate, it might be difficult on just that one estate itself finding the people, so it might need a slightly broader area. So we're trying to get the balance right in terms of some of that. But I think that and as well as we were trying to do with Mayflower, and clearly we need to work harder on that if we are to build new homes at Mayflower, but we need to sell what other advantages there might be as well. The fact that there could be a new community hall which is fit for purpose, I think, is a real opportunity there, and that's an opportunity which, whilst it's clear that Mayflower aren't necessarily happy about that, there are some other estates where they are pursuing that and looking into that in greater detail. And we'll obviously pursue those things where people come forward with those.
Can I just ask very quickly as well? So if we've got estates who have ideas about things, what's the best way of getting those? Who are we sending ideas to in the first instance?
Well, you can. We sort of did a round of collecting it from various different resources last time. We also had it as part of the new homes consultation. It was on the council's website where people could identify sites on a map and make comments, and that also meant, because it was in the open, that people can make counter comments if they didn't particularly like the ideas people put forward. So the website has been one way. I mean, clearly.
What about if we've got future ones? What's the best way to get new ideas?
That's direct to our team, either a new homes delivery team or if it's a partnership team, it was Bruce's team split between us. So we when they came in, then we'll look and see who's best team to deliver it. Okay. But certainly anything put through to my team, I put forward to Bruce and vice versa.
Wonderful, thank you.
Good, thank you. Tom.
Chair.
Chair.
Sorry, yeah, I've got you next, David.
Sorry,
I've got a list.
You're not forgotten, David.
I've got a Jasmine, you're on the list as well. Gosh, wow, right. Tom, be quick.
I'd like to just turn our attention to the procurement section of the report. Bruce has answered most of what I was going to ask about paragraph 45. Maybe just a suggestion, wouldn't mind seeing the word local in there, about operators. I know Bruce said that you were talking to people who could and would work in the borough, and that's great to hear. But just from the perspective of when you're writing this stuff down, it would be great to see Southwark or local or something like that mentioned. 47 is what my main question was on. I just wondered if you could explain paragraph 47. I don't, from what's written there, I'm struggling to work out what that means, especially the last sentence in terms of access agreement with Harringay. Yes, the Haringey construction framework is probably one of the largest and most flexible of construction frameworks we've had for many years. It covers a range of different contractors. I can't remember how many, Dave, you might remember, but it's a range and it's divided into bands. So that what that means is that you're picking contractors who are suitable for a particular type of work, as opposed to just giving it to the larger contractors who then subcontract. And what this paragraph is basically saying is there's a new framework here. We have now signed the access agreement. What we do know about the agreement is it is quite flexible. For example, we can use many different forms of contract. The contract we're likely to use is the JCT contract with Council Amends, because it seems to strike the best balance between protecting the council's interest but also in terms of risk transfer. So that's what that paragraph means, that where we have larger projects which we need to crack on with, rather than go through an urgent process which may well produce a similar answer, we're using contractors who have already been pre-tested. There's another side to this, is the use of architects, and one of the things which we want to work on in the light of what was covered in the Bidders' Day, is also to do something similar for architects as well. So we encourage some of the smaller practices who can probably work with the larger practices, and therefore we can get a better range of design ideas into Southwark. But I agree, the emphasis should be on local contractors where they can subcontract to the main contractors, and that's something which Dave and I are working on. Really, it's a process which we've started, which is really just to try and engage a wider range of procurement opportunities. For example, in the Bidders' Day, we looked at widening the Exor list, so we invited people who were at the Bidders' Day to sign up for that list, so that we can get again a wider range of contractors who may not be on a framework, but would still be suitable for contracting for below the overdue limit, and that applies to quite a few of the direct delivery schemes, I think.
Thank you. Dave.
Okay, sorry for my impatience,
That's
but
all right.
maybe I'd been overlooked.
That
would be dreadful. So I've got two questions, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the first one is to the issue around the Mayfair. So just to understand it, so you talked obviously about a survey that had been done, and it seems to bring up a memory that there was a survey of all TNRA halls done, and I'm assuming it's possibly part of that. Is that what the survey you're referring to, or has there been an additional survey?
I believe so. It was a survey which took place in 2012. I know that.
Yeah, and that was done on all TNRA halls, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So there hasn't been another survey. It's just that it's the 2012 survey.
I think we clearly need to do probably another survey.
Well, I would suggest so, because you suggested that it's not very reliable, the 2012 survey.
No, absolutely. So there were holes, as I said, we found that a number of the outcomes from that survey were significantly out in terms of what the eventual cost was. So I think we do need to.
So based on that, I think maybe we should be surveying again, if necessary.
Yeah, I think that's a very sensible suggestion.
I mean, are you able to say if any other halls have been identified as not being good enough to maintain?
I'm trying to recall what other ones. We certainly have some other halls that there are discussions around. I'm trying to. Yeah. This is the only one where it is the state of repair that I'm aware of that has led it to come forward. There have been some other ones that have come forward. There have been. There's one where we're currently in discussion with the TRA, and it's probably too early for me to be clear about where it is, because I don't think the discussions with the TRA would allow us to do that.
As a ward councillor to ask, could I get reassurances about the status of the halls in my ward, for example?
I'm pretty certain there aren't any in your ward that have been identified.
And my last question in relation to that is a new hall proposed should the Mayflower TNRA go ahead, or is that not even being discussed yet?
Well, that was part and parcel of the proposal that we took forward to the Mayflower, was that actually let's have a fit for purpose community facility which serves the local community more effectively than the current hall alongside new homes. So that was, it was not an idea that we just get rid of the hall, have no hall at all and have new council homes. It was very much about providing a fit for purpose community facility.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, so obviously in my ward you're spending £10 million on potentially buying some affordable housing units at 124 to 150 Blackfriars Road. My question on that is, can you reassure me that there's no double counting? So obviously we were going to get 56 affordable housing units that are run by a housing association, and obviously these are potentially now going to become 56 council properties. So yeah, I'd just like reassurance that that's not being double counted anywhere. Secondly, how does the cost compare of us buying from a developer homes that they're building and turning into council homes compared to building brand new council homes on council land? And finally, can you reassure me that your pledge won't come before value for money? So actually, you won't keep buying homes from developers just to hit your target. It actually is a lot cheaper to do it by building on our own land where we can identify suitable land.
Okay. I'll try these. Officers might well want to come in on some of these things. I think the cost comparison one I might need some officer advice on. In terms of double counting, I mean, the homes that are being built at Blackfriars, and again, jump in if I've got this wrong, but I think those homes are being built as affordable homes and come out as the planning policy as part of the proportion of housing there that's affordable. We are then taking an option to buy those homes. So they are affordable homes that are being developed as part of the development. We're opting to have those as council housing. So I don't think there's double counting because whilst we'll be counting the 56 for against our council housing target, we're not then adding that to the level of affordable homes to come up with a figure that's twice as much as that. So I think it's been very clear, we have to be very clear about what the purpose is for that and how we're counting those, but I don't think there's the opportunity for double counting there. Cost comparisons, I think Bruce might be best placed to give, but just in terms of pledge around value for money, we will clearly, it's very important we are providing the homes, but it's also really important that we're doing this in the most cost-effective way. We are certainly doing this because it's the most cost-effective way to go forward and to deliver those homes that we need. So yes, we will be doing it to ensure that we are not only just meeting the pledge, but doing it in a cost-effective way that achieves value for money.
David, can I suggest you just work up a recommendation with regard to that point you made about resurveying, given the deficiencies in the 2012 survey? It sounds like that's something that needs to happen fairly urgently, given. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I assume resurveying any whole, not doing the whole survey again, or just doing the survey where appropriate, where it might be affected by.
Yeah, just repeat it, but where appropriate and applicable. Yeah. Okay, Jasmine.
Yeah. I don't know if officers were going to say anything about the cost comparison, or maybe they won't.
Yes, the cost.
Let's jump back to that. Sorry, Jasmine.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think I should quote the cost in the committee because it's a commercial figure, but what I do know is that what we got for Blackfriars Road was very competitive indeed. So it's a good deal for the council.
Yeah.
I think the issue of cost is something which we're looking at all the time, and this is why I go back to the point we made about making sure we have the widest possible market, because that will clearly achieve competition in a construction market rather than just simply leaving it to the people who are always building in Southwark.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do, and that will get a better price for the council. In addition to that, during the procurement process, we go through a lot of technical checks, both on the quality of what's being offered, but also of cost comparisons. And that is something which is crucial before we make a recommendation that a project should be proceeded with. I'm also dealing, for example, at the moment with the schools programme. And we have exactly the same challenges where we have to provide the school places, but we're not prepared to do it at any price. It has to be cost effective and something we can recommend.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to, thank you for the report. It's very comprehensive, but I just wanted to link it a bit, if I may, to the regeneration issue, because I live in the Lane ward, which is obviously, the centre of regeneration.
I'm not going to start that again. It's like council assembly.
But one of the things that keeps me awake at night is thinking about how you maintain the diversity, with all the regeneration, the high turnover of people, and so on. So I was just looking at the report and looking at the principles and then skipping to page 13, what I'm looking for seems to be covered in the design, point 54. Point 1, promote equality, diversity and social cohesion through tenure, blind design. But I'm just wondering if we should, actually in our documentation say more about that really, and how, because if you think about all the regeneration that we're doing, housing more than the square in Peckham, which generates quite a lot of interest, more than the station, gives us an opportunity to actually exert control really. So I'm just wondering, given that this is a 30-year plan, how we can actually guarantee that our affordable homes will stay affordable really. So that's my question.
Okay, I think clearly that the homes that we're building here as part of the 11,000 are all council homes at council rent. So by definition, they are going to be affordable to our communities as well, as affordable as any housing is going to be. This clearly is the most affordable forms of housing that we're building. So hopefully that objective will make sure the 11,000 are affordable. Okay. I think there's probably a broader question there for Mark when he returns from holiday and his regen brief, which I really am not equipped to answer in terms of some of those broader issues about development control for developers that aren't part of the programme.
Yeah,
but clearly
on Rye Lane where I live actually.
Clearly what we're doing through the whole regeneration and partnership programme, which is probably where you've got that interface between private developers and the council in terms of our new council homes. Yeah, it's specifically about assuring there is that affordability. So hopefully that's some reassurance. Just in terms of 54, 54 is just a very brief summary of the report that went to last Cabinet in terms of the whole design values, which is not only pertinent to the council's own stock, but actually for all planning proposals that are coming forward and all developments. So it might be worth having a look at that report in a bit more detail, so that you can reassure yourself that some of those issues are covered properly.
Quick one. And I understand that all our, the housing that we're building now, all the council stock, will resemble all the housing that's surrounding it, so you won't be able to, that it will blend in. Is that right?
It's more about making sure that we don't have pour doors. This is very much. Pour doors. So you might have known there's been a lot of coverage in the press in recent years of developments where the development has got a nice plush entrance for the people that buy their homes, and then a door around the side for the affordable housing. And some of that is because of reasons obviously about service charges and things, but we want to make sure that you don't have those obvious sort of disparities.
We're going to design that out.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
Clear principles, part and parcel.
Good, thank you.
More questions from Mark.
Anu.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just one more question on the Mayflower, and then another wider one, which was just the Chair sort of answered the question about whether the Mayflower would be taken off the list, and I just was interested in whether that was your answer as well, given that's what people wanted. And the second question is a wider question about rents, because you say council rents, but we recently had a briefing from officers and they said the new homes being built would be at target rents, which my understanding is that's 10% higher than council rents. So I wondered if you could clarify that.
Well, new tenancies are all given at target rents.
Which are 10% higher than council rents?
In some cases they're not. I mean, it varies.
I think in all cases. Do you know how much target rent is? I can tell you.
Well, it'll depend per property, won't it?
The average actual rent in Southwark, council rent is £99 and target rent is £109.
But that, as I said, that's an average, so it's not necessarily like for like in terms of property, because it's an average.
Another question. But that's a yes, it is higher than council rents.
It may be in some cases, yes, but
so
it's.
When you say they will all be at council rents, that's not actually correct.
Well. No, because what I'm saying is that you've come up with an average there, which is across all the council stock. So if you look at every type of home that the council rents out, and you look at the average across all of those, then it will come out at £99 per week. If you look at our new build, because we're building them to a higher standard, and that would actually feed into the level of rent that would be calculated for it, then yes, if we're building better homes, then of course the rent is likely to come out at a higher level, but it comes out the same process.
Okay. And
sorry, Mayflower.
Last one on the Mayflower.
Right, on Mayflower, well I think in terms of the question about it coming off the list, you mean?
Well, that was Sue's question number 5, which Gavin answered for you.
Well, Gavin said that I'd heard the comments that were made by them. I have heard the comments that's made by them. I think we've clearly already got scheduled further meetings with them. I want to, if we go through this consultation process and it's very clear that there's still a large amount of opposition to it, then clearly we'll need to rethink our decision. But at the moment, I think actually what's being offered is a good deal. I think we need to probably work with them and understand why they don't think it's a good deal and work that through.
Until they agree with you, you mean?
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, we've only had one meeting with them, which was the meeting that took place in October. We tried to have another meeting with them this month, and that didn't go ahead. I understand the next meeting is already scheduled for January.
Sorry, their question is how can they take it off the list?
Well, the answer to that is if, as we work through the consultation, it becomes very clear that that it's not something we're going to be able to do. That's the point. We will take it off the list.
Okay. So through the consultation,
Johnson process. But I think it's right we follow the consultation process through.
Yeah, better late than never. So.
Johnson.
My fellow ward colleagues will kill me if I don't flag up. Lexyard's site is in SE15. So just wanted to flag that from 106. In terms of when you previously came, there was a discussion around in terms of 1,500 by 2018, and I know it was put forward that we're fairly confident we'll be able to reach that number by 2015. 2018. Sorry. How confident are we now in terms of numbers?
We're still very much on track to do that. As we talked about, there are some risk factors in all of this. But we're very much we want to make sure that we have those 1,500 homes by 2018, and we believe we can do that. So we're working on, we're still working towards that. Yes, apologies for the misspelling. Yes, Flaxyards I know rather than Flexyard. Yes, so apologies for that. We'll make sure I get to put right.
Yeah, protest impeccable.
Okay, all right. Helen.
Can I ask 3 questions, Chair?
Okay. Your new councillor, your newly elected, so you've got catching up. And then I'm going to take Rosie, and then I'm going to have some, and then that's it for the session. You might be ready to hear. So
in relation to sites which are hard to unlock, there's been some work done. The leather market, CBS is mentioned. From a ward perspective, I'd love to get an update on Joseph Lancaster. Obviously, Kipling Garages has been under discussion, as we're aware of. But I'm interested in if there are any other types of models with community land trusts or others that are being looked at where sites are particularly proving maybe challenging and could benefit maybe from a different model. I know this is primarily about the 11,000 new council homes, but in relation to intermediate housing, which is mentioned in the report, and the decision that was taken at Cabinet to look at kind of new products and developments of a quality discounted market rent products rather than shared ownership. I think we're all very conscious that there's a big gap there in the market, if you like. Can you give us the timeline around that? How that's being developed and any process of testing that out and consultation for that product? And then in relation to the asset management strategy, paragraph 79, and obviously again that's something which is under consultation at the moment, but the number of properties that require further investigation around long-term sustainability, obviously we're all again conscious probably of anxiety out there in the community about properties and the future of them. Is that list available for councillors in terms of those that have been taken out of the programme for the foreseeable?
Okay, shall I? John?
Yeah. On the list, I think there were 2 sites in that first year coming through. We've looked and we've reappraised them now, and one of them I think is 4 units above commercial, so that is available. We can make that available, but they're the ones we think we might be looking at again to see how much investment they need against the long term, because they're bed sits. Long-term future, whether we should maintain them as bed sits going forward.
It's a very small number.
It's a very small number. There aren't floods of these across the borough by any means, and I think there is a question about bed sits in particular, which I think we do need to look at, because some of our bed sits are in a very poor quality. Is the right thing there to give people better homes rather than try to invest to do up what's not a very good home in the first place? So we do have a question about bed sits. Just in terms of some of the others, I'm not sure we've got a timeline yet for intermediary housing. We're looking at different options, and we're sort of asking questions of our local authorities about what models they have. And the big challenge that we have around intermediate housing is that the sort of shared ownership model is becoming harder and harder to make work, and that's what housing associations are telling us, that you're finding actually to make the rent levels work and the mortgage values work, you're having to have very high levels of deposits, which means it becomes only really available to those people that are lucky enough to have wealthy parents that might be willing to dip into their pockets to help out. And that's clearly only meeting a very small amount of the need that we have there. So we're trying to look at, well, are there different models around a discounted market rent which might be more appropriate, and identifying, I think, that particularly for key workers. I think the question then rises who you put in as a key worker, and we've got an idea that clearly people like teachers and nurses and I think social workers, firemen, firefighters, and police might well qualify. Yeah. The police one becomes interesting because the police aren't allowed to live in the same borough where they work. So actually, you probably need to look at you need to look at reciprocal deals on all of that as well with other boroughs. I think
we can. We have police officers in Richmond.
Oh, okay.
No. So they're the higher ranks.
So the opposite of councillors. We
Well, I think it's so that I think it might be you're right. It might be at a certain level. I think, but it's particularly that concern that things that you deal with day to day might come home to you in the night is the problem. In terms of sites hard to unlock, and the Joseph Lancaster site, and Joseph Lancaster is a little different to the Kipling Garages site, because the Kipling Garages site is a site that came forward through Leathermarket CBS's work. So they identified that themselves. It wasn't something the council identified in the first place. They thought this was a potential site, and they realised that the only way it was likely to be a site that people who lived on the Kipling estate were willing to have converted from garages to homes was if they did the CBS approach. Joseph Lancaster, we've certainly talked to CBS as it possibly being something they take forward. We've not reached a conclusion on that yet, but the Joseph Lancaster site is a site that is land that's in the council's ownership, that isn't housing land, and so doesn't have the same issues about it needing that community buy-in in quite the same way to be able to release the land at all, because the land is there. But clearly what we want to do is make sure that development there is meeting local needs and local people are happy with it as part and parcel of what gets developed there. So we are having conversations with CBS about whether Joseph Lancaster could be one of their sites. That's not been concluded yet.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick one from me, Richard, on the housing delivery vehicle, which always conjures up in my mind the image of a big digger going around the borough.
A big lorry with houses on the back.
I'm not recommending you do that. But so with regard to that, obviously that's been done for very good reasons, and I just wanted to just clarify once and for all what that means in terms of the knock-on impact on right to buy for council homes. So obviously one of the reasons we're doing this is we want to build the council's housing stock, and we want to have a borough of mixed tenures, and that includes us building up towards that 11,000 new council homes. Obviously the danger that we're trying to guard against is basically homes falling off through right to buy, which then we know on a lot of occasions it ends up with those homes going on to the private rented sector, etc., etc., etc. So what exactly is the situation with regard to the right to buy on those new council homes delivered through the housing delivery vehicle?
Okay, it's probably worth clarifying at this stage that none of these homes are being delivered through the vehicle. The vehicle is an option that's available to us, and the principal reason it is there is not really about right to buy. The principal reason it is there is so that we have an ability to borrow money to build homes.
Yeah.
Now, at the moment, we don't need to borrow money at all because the programme up to 2018 is funded through the commuted sums, through right to buy receipts, through grants that we're receiving. So the vehicle is not envisaged to do anything before 2018 at the moment. The legalities about what that means for right to buy, I think, are interesting. I think clearly the Housing and Planning Bill suggests that might actually create perhaps some new parameters around that as well. So we don't know the answer to that yet. We'll probably have a clear idea once that legislation is through, but it's not immediately relevant because it's not something we're using. It's just something we've established because we know at some point we probably will need to use it to be able to borrow money to build homes, but we're not there up till 2018.
Sorry, Chair, can I just pick up on that? So the council homes at target rents, which you're building over 30 years, will they be subject to right to buy?
Yes. The homes we're building at the moment certainly are yeah.
That's fine. There's nothing to do with the housing and planning bill, that's to do with what you're building now.
Yes, yeah. Well, as in any council home, any council tenant that comes in would be able to have the right to buy for those new homes.
Okay, so I'm aware that the lady here was indicating earlier, and I'm sorry you've had to wait so long. I wanted to get through that list of questions. Was there a question you wanted to ask the cabinet member or the committee?
Well, it was something that came up. I'm a committee member at the TRA, the Mayflower TRA.
Oh, at the Mayflower as well.
Okay.
And so there were a couple of questions that people had asked about seeing one of them that came up for me particularly was the consultation process, the question that you've added, like, you've done this a lot of times, what is the official process? So I would love to know what that is. So maybe in those documents that you're going to send to the TRA, you could include that as well.
We can certainly set out the process and everything. I mean, I think what we might need to do and have a conversation, perhaps when I come and visit the hall, as I said I would do, is talk to the TRA about what's the best way to do this, because I know we've tried to do that as part and parcel of the TRA meetings for one reason or the other, such as the AGMs, such as other things that have gone on. That's proved difficult, so perhaps we need to consider, do we set up a project team, for example, to look specifically at this issue and work it through with the TRA, and we're happy to do that if that's helpful and helps progress the consultation.
So can we just add that to the list of the other documents that you're going to send to us?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Well, I think David's pointed me to the Charter of Principles, but I think we probably need something a bit more specific and tailored to the Mayflower, and being very clear to the Mayflower about how we see the process running for them. I think that would be important.
Sorry, Chair, can I just pick up on that as well? I just think it's really important if you're going to go in and do a consultation that it's not a reverse engineering, which is what we're seeing with some other consultations in the borough, that you don't go in with a set, this is what we want, and we're trying to get people to sign up for it or buy into it, but actually it's a conversation with them genuinely about the hall and what the future of it is.
I think that's, I'd agree with that, and I think that's what we're trying to achieve here. I mean, clearly we have a challenge with the hall, which I think there's some agreement on about quite what we need to do with it. I think is something that needs further discussion. Clearly, it makes sense to look at the opportunity there is around new homes there as well. And that's it at the moment. And we've talked about potentially what those numbers might look like. We talked about some broad principles, but we're more than happy to debate those. There's nothing. It's not as if we've got a plan up our sleeve which we're trying to steer.
You do. It was in the September cabinet report.
Well, we have an outline of an outline. No, we have an outline. We have an outline
repeat
vision.
The conversation we've already had.
We have an outline vision for what that could look like. But clearly, the consultation is about getting to a solution. What I'm saying is there isn't There isn't something that is definitely the answer, which is the only answer. You know, it is that we're flexible and all
You
of this.
wouldn't
And whilst,
consult
of
with a
course,
blank
we have
piece
to
of
have,
paper, would you?
yeah, you don't
No.
start with a blank sheet of
No.
paper, but we need to
I don't
get.
know why.
Okay,
actually,
right.
don't.
I'm gonna move us on to David's. The recommendation I mentioned, David. Have you got a wording that you could put to the committee?
It's rather a long one.
I like asking someone for their homework.
There may be a bit of a shorter way of doing it, but
okay, we better be quick because the Wi-Fi is going to kick out soon.
okay. So it's, the OSC recommends that in light of the concerns expressed about the accuracy of the 2012 survey of TNRA halls, that a commitment is made to carry out a new survey of any TNRA hall being considered for demolition under the delivery of 11,000 council homes programme prior to any final decision.
That seems
Yeah,
pretty sensible to me. Can we agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, agreed. Thank you, and thank you for coming along this evening.
I've got another recommendation.
Okay, go ahead.
My recommendation is, I think you've already agreed to it, but I'd like it to be an OSC recommendation, that you write to Mayflower TRA putting your apology in writing,
Yeah.
and giving them the minutes of the June and July meetings and an explanation of why they weren't given the survey when they requested it.
Okay. Can we agree to that as a recommendation?
Yes.
Did you get that wording?
It's on video.
It's
Yeah,
on
you'd
video.
think that would be enough, but the last couple of meetings, I can tell you, it doesn't seem to be that simple. Anyway.
Okay.
Right. I'm going to draw that to a close. Thank you to Richard and the officers and to other people who contributed tonight for coming along to that session. I suggest we have a short break now and then come back after 5 minutes or so for the rest of the meeting.